You graduated from Stanford. How was that experience?
In the industry, people feel differently about Stanford.
What was the pain point that you observed?
It's all about solving the fragmentation and solving the need.
Also providing services while you're building the product, how that works.
I'll say this, right? Which is ideally, construction companies are paying for an outcome.
What is Scrum?
So it's just as simple as visibility and accountability.
How is Scrum different from a to-do list?
And because you are measuring it, now you can improve it.
Things to be considered before you step into this world of entrepreneurship.
Entrepreneurship seems scarier than it is. Because plan A always turns into plan B and plan C, even if you think you're doing plan A. Turns out that sometimes the world knows a little bit more about what's going to make it better than you do.
How do you go about selecting a co-founder?
Pick someone who's potentially at things that are not overlapping to you.
In today's episode of Constructing Tomorrow, we have Elijah Zenger. Elijah is a co-founder of Roger, which is a construction collaboration software that focuses on productivity and workflow optimization. Before Roger, he worked at Lucid Analytics as a head of product and at EY as an associate in the context space. In this episode, we're going to talk about his experiences and lessons learned while at Stanford, things to consider when building a construction tech company, profitable business models in contact companies, what is Scrum and its applications in construction, how to select the right co-founder, advice for aspiring entrepreneurs, and much more. With that said, I bring you Elijah. Hi, Elijah. Thanks for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yep, absolutely. We're going to cover a lot about construction productivity and Scrum. But before that, I wanted to talk to you about your journey, your background, your education. So you graduated from Stanford. How was that experience?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like in the industry, people feel differently about Stanford. And so another founder from Stanford might feel a little bit stale, but for me, it was really the place I always wanted to be. I grew up on the East Coast in Boston, and I was just laser focused on being somewhere that I felt like uh, really would teach me how to build a business. I was that kid who grew up selling granola and lemonade and everything else I could figure out on the side of the road to try and like build my own little business. And so I think like for me, it's just a place where I could go to really meet the people that I think these days are really important to meet as you're building a venture business and to learn from everyone who's done it before.
Like looking back at things, what's one thing that you feel like Stanford taught you?
I feel like, I mean, this is directly in kind of related to business building, but my most memorable experience is probably starting my first company there. And they're still running. They're amazing. But we were there as my senior year, and we had this idea and actually ended up patenting a new piece of consumer technology. And so going through the process of doing a provisional patent, raising money, entering some accelerators as a student, and just like learning how to build that company, how to share the vision with others, and basically will something into into really existence just because I was passionate about it and my co-founders were passionate about it. I feel like it really taught me a lot of how to do it now and really demystify the process when it came to like starting Roger now a couple ventures later, having that network, but also having the know-how to just say, okay, we're going to go for it, get it done. And I believe that we're going to be able to sell or be able to raise money or whatever it might be. Yeah, I wouldn't be where I am today without, I think, that experience.
Yeah, you mentioned about networking, right? And I know you met your co-founder also at Stanford. How did that come along?
So we were actually in the same freshman dorm, me and him. And so we met very early on in our experiences, obviously different paths. So I really focused on operations and analytics, and a lot of my studies, a lot of my time was spent on almost like productivity and making processes better, either via data or metrics. And his background was all construction and he was pretty focused on doing sustainable design and construction and went into the master's program there. And so at the end of the day, we crossed paths early, and then when we reconnected years later, he's the one that actually magnetized me back into the AEC space and taught me, honestly, the small sliver that I need to know to do what we do. And there's probably a whole mountain left that we're learning every single day.
What was kind of that thing that made you move into construction?
So I think his expertise was huge, right? I think there's a lot of companies that look at construction and they're like, whoa, it's a huge market. And, we're still working on digitizing everything. What if we just started our company and dove in? And I think there's a big graveyard, right, of companies that have fought that fight without understanding the whole network. And so, one, his expertise, his Stanford background, his ability to understand, I think, the what I like to make fun of him for is like the philosophy behind construction, how big projects really get completed, and how you bring a team together was huge for me. And then I think he talked to me about the pain, right? And I think every great business is focused on solving a pain that a customer set really, really needs solved and needs solved right now. And so he showed me, and I spent a lot of time actually bringing monsters out to job sites, watching PMs and PEs work and seeing and hearing from them their experiences and what was really hard. And after that, I think I couldn't say no to trying to build something to help.
So before building Roger, obviously you would have done a lot of market study, seeing where the pain points are. What was the pain point that you observed?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many in construction. For us, we actually started with a user in mind, which is not always the right thing to do as a business, right? A lot of times you want to build to the person that you're going to sell to. But we watched project outcomes, right? And we sat down with PMs and PEs who are going to be our end user of the product. And what we saw was that performance on projects came when people had great repeatable processes. But the issue when we visited different types of construction, different projects, or even spent time with the trades, was that the industry is so fragmented that not only that knowledge, but a tool that was going to support everyone was really not in existence or was very hard, right? And so Roger was born out of this goal of helping teach and create great processes at every single project, knowing that projects are different and their needs are different. And so our whole business is built on this model of sitting down project by project or company by company and saying, what is it that you need? What are your key performance indicators? What are your metrics? Is it minimizing delay days? Is it getting through buyout as fast as possible? Are whatever it is that that company is laser focused on solving, we bake that into an experience for their PMs and PEs that really incentivizes great outcomes with our software. And so for us, it's all about solving the fragmentation and solving the need for better project outcomes from day one.
That's actually an interesting approach. So essentially, you've looked at, okay, company A needs a feature, so you help them build the feature. Company B needs help with something else, so you kind of built the other feature. So you kind of went from pain points to pain points and then built a process for each company setup. And I think that's how you kind of built your portfolio, right?
Yep. And the focus or the understanding was always that we needed to build infrastructure, right? So infrastructure that ended up being flexible so that we could continue to problem solve company by company. But the other thing that a lot of these projects especially need is an ability to put it on like the P&L statement, literally, like how do we charge this to the project? And often the budget even for software is not that big, but the budget for services is huge. And the ability for us to sit down and provide a service to them by tracking metrics or delivering results, then kind of backed into a way where we could create a system for them that they could use repeatably kind of from that project forward.
Can you expand a little bit more on this business model? I think I was reading a post yesterday, something similar on this one, also providing services and while you're building the product. Walk us through how that works.
I'll say this, right? Which is ideally, construction companies are paying for an outcome. For us, we feel like we can deliver that outcome. So let's say the outcome is perfect or near perfect procurement, right? We need to get all of our materials bought and on site on time so that the schedule isn't delayed. So the service that they're purchasing from us is us to sit down with their team to build a system that's going to automate a lot of the busy work out of that, right? So sending emails, checking in on items, requesting lead times, following up on deliveries. That can all get baked in as a service and something that we're basically automating out of that. But we're also teaching their team, hey, this is what best in class procurement looks like. We've learned this from Swinnerton. We've learned this from some of these big GCs that not only we're partnered with or we've come from, and so the service is a lot in the training more than anything else. But the way that it's delivered then is through the software.
I have a couple of questions on that analogy. So, do you feel that taking on that service also comes along with some risks? And the other question is, what's the margin on offering that service versus the product itself, maybe on a monthly basis, or it might be on percentage of the project? What do you feel is good profit wise?
It really depends, right? So we'll work with some companies and it will come through as a guarantee, right? Hey, we're going to, if they have in the past tracked their delay days on procurement, again, kind of just going back to that as one of our key ones where we win a lot of business. They know how many delay days they have on average, and we come in and say we're going to reduce your delay days by some amount, or we'll do it for free, basically. Like we've done all this work and we won't get paid. And so that's one where sure, we're taking on a lot of risk, but we're really confident that our work is going to yield results, especially if we help the team focus on minimizing those delay days and getting their buyout done fast, right? And so there's definitely some risk, but we feel like no matter what we charge, if we're charging less than 10 delay days worth of liquidated damages on a project, right, where they're not getting GCs or whatever that might be, then obviously the margin is purely advantageous for them, right? They're making money back. And so I think that's part of it and part of why the business side really makes sense.
So there's a lot of productivity tools out there. I want to touch upon Scrum. So there's a lot of people who have heard Scrum, but it's mostly used in software development side of things. Let's start with what is Scrum.
Sure. In its most base form, Scrum is a form of maintaining accountability with your team, and it's a set of practices at the end of the day that help deliver a project, right? And the way that it's done is there's a couple of what they call artifacts, but I'm going to keep it not like Scrum mastery language for everybody. It's really just a couple meetings, one of which is a daily huddle where everyone assigns out tasks and what they're going to do today. And at the end of some allotted period of time, either a week or 2 weeks, you make sure you've done everything that you said you're going to do. And so it's just as simple as visibility and accountability so that everyone's working on the right thing at the right time.
How is Scrum different from a to-do list? Because it also kind of provides you the accountability. It's obviously for yourself because most of the times you would do a to-do list for you to remember the tasks. So what's the difference?
Yeah. So usually Scrum is undertaken by a team. And for us, we actually have people who sign up for Roger thinking they're going to use it for personal task tracking, and we usually dissuade them from doing so because there is nothing better than a piece of paper or your notes on your phone to track your own personal stuff. That's my opinion. I still use Apple Notes insane amount. But Scrum is all about making that accountability across a team really visible. So let's take even our own internal software, which we develop using Scrum, right? The idea is that you, at the beginning of the week, can create a set of tickets. In Scrum, they normally call them tags, but really it's just tasks. So task 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you assign them out to the team based on their priority and the amount of time that it's going to take. So rather than it just being a to-do list for everyone, you're really saying Elijah is accountable for this, Sid is accountable for that, Josh, my co-founder, is accountable for this. And you actually assign points to each of those tasks that relate to how much time or effort roughly you think those are going to take. What's the unit of work involved to get it to completion? And so now as you go day by day, you can really quickly check in and say, did you get those two things done? What are we working on next? And at the end of the week, you can tally up all of the points, all of the tasks that you guys completed, and actually have a measure for how much work you got done. And because you are measuring it, now you can improve it. So if we did 100 points as a team of 5 this week, next week we're going to try and do 110 points. Or the following week we're going to try and do 120 points, right? And so it also gives you a way to not only create that accountability, but to measure your performance and improve it over time in a way that to-do lists just never are going to help your team like that, right? There's nothing that's going to create accountability in that same structure.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I want to actually go deep into this from like a construction perspective. So I've personally used Trello and MS Planner, but those were for my personal like to-do list. My question is, do you have any construction examples on how teams can use Scrum boards?
Totally. Well, first and foremost, Felipe Engineer is the guy. And he's one of our kind of partners, friends, and he literally wrote the book. It's titled Construction Scrum, I believe, or Scrum and Construction. Oh man, he's going to get mad at me for not pubbing him as well as I should. But Felipe is amazing. And the content that he's created, especially the lean community, he will talk to you about Scrum implementations for as long as you have. But I can talk about a couple of the projects that we've run that have implemented Scrum. One in particular is with a top 15 GC in the nation, so ENR top 15, and they're working on a hospital in Southern California, Kaiser Permanente Hospital. And they have a team of about 15 running Scrum on a weekly basis out of Roger. And there's some great features that we have that help make it construction aligned. Again, of course, the collaborative parts of it. We have a couple integrations that we feel like are really key to what Scrum aspires to be, which in this case, one of the big ones would be email. So we integrate with Outlook or Gmail. And so any user, if they have a task, which is follow up on a procurement item or check in on an air handler or whatever that might be, they can actually send an email directly from Roger rather than having to pull up Outlook, find out who they're sending it to, type it all out, check again. All of that history and all of that action can be taken in one single place. And so once that task is also completed, if you're ever checking again, hey, did we do this? What happened? You can pull up that task really quickly, find the attached emails, even see all those replies. And so it becomes this rich history also for what got done and what's the context behind it that becomes really successful for these construction teams. Another feature that we have is you would think that everything would have this, but Trello doesn't have this and Planner doesn't have this. But the ability to pull tasks from every single one of your Scrum boards across multiple projects into one big task dashboard. To this day, I have no idea why the other softwares haven't really pulled that in, especially Planner and Trello. But you can have a project executive who basically they go into their task center and they can see the tasks from all of their people across all of the projects that they are overseeing and actually drill into what is it that Sid's working on? Has he completed it? Again, what are the attachments in here? What are the emails that got sent? So he has this one-stop shop for actually seeing the work that's being completed or in progress without having to go into 6 different Trello boards or 6 different teams, channels, or whatever it might be. So some of those small things make a huge difference when it comes to just how construction is run, right?
Are there any resources to become like a Scrum Master?
Yeah. So Felipe as well, he runs a Scrum Master training. He does it every couple months, and I've actually done it myself recently. I did it so that I could see it from the construction side because again, I my background is all software. It was fascinating, it was wonderful. And so I can pass a link along to you and you can pass it on to any listeners that would be interested.
I have a few questions regarding entrepreneurship in general. So you're also, I would say, a young professional, and you're early in your career with entrepreneurship. I wanted to ask, firstly, what all things are important to be considered before you step into this world of entrepreneurship?
Mm, wow, great questions. So the first I think is that entrepreneurship seems scarier than it is. And I say that because there's a lot you can do without incurring a lot of risk. So I think the mistake that I see people make the most is they quit their job and then they say they want to start something and then they start on a path of trying to build a business or test a business or find a market. And the problem is you're not getting paid. And that's usually stressful, right? But entrepreneurship, there's so much exploration. There are so many problems to be solved in the world that you can think about and test and ideate around while you're working full time. And all of my ventures have come out of a time where they were not my number one focus. And you keep a running list in Apple Notes. Like I literally have in all caps an Apple Note that says startup ideas, and it's been running for years. And like I run into something where I'm like, man, this is annoying for me. And I'll put it in that list and maybe I'll come back to it someday. And I probably work more than I should, but I take time on Saturdays and Sundays in the mornings to like pursue another venture and tinker and build a little piece of software. So like it doesn't need to be this big jump. It's really in all cases really should be baby steps. And when you actually decide to build the business, you should have done so much research and seen so much signal that almost you can't help but start it. So that's at least my 2 cents on entrepreneurship. I don't know if that does that make sense to you? Like, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I feel like again, I have two analogies regarding this, because you always hear that you should never have a plan B, and you should always go all in on your plan A, and that is one of the traits that would make you successful. But then there's also another part where you also need to explore while you're building what you're doing. So I still don't know, because I haven't ventured into that. So what would be the right balance?
Yeah, I feel like I've never bought into only have plan A and do it till you die. Uh, because plan A always turns into plan B and plan C, even if you think you're doing plan A. That's, hey, what one man's experience, right? But you raise money for plan A, you're chasing down plan A, and then what you thought was plan A, your customers actually are like, oh man, this really solves B. And all of a sudden, great, you technically built the thing you wanted to build, but everyone's using it for something different. And you say, oh, okay, well, we just learned something. And if you can't take that feedback, it's a long road, right? Or you're probably out of luck. So I agree with it. And committing to the journey is essential for sure. But I consider that more like the plan A, plan B sort of thing. Is you have to be committed to saying, I'm going to be successful and I'm going to create something that makes the world better. And I have an opinion about that. But turns out that sometimes the world knows a little bit more about what's going to make it better than you do along the way.
The second question was, how do you go about selecting a co-founder?
Oh, just someone who you're ready to get to know as well as yourself. And I don't know if you can ever really know if you're ready for that, but it's a crazy journey, and you just got to be ready to be best friends and worst enemies at different times, and enjoy it for what it is. Like I think that's probably glib. So let me give you a real answer, which is pick someone who's way better than you at a lot of things. And I also think potentially at things that are not overlapping to you, and find someone who is going to be strong when you're weak. In whether it's you're great at go to market and they're great at product, or you're great at marketing and they're awesome at literally building technology, right? You just have to find those people who fill those gaps. And you like spending most of your life with. It's a lot of time.
What about conflicting opinions on a topic? If you have two founders, how do you decide on which option to go with?
It depends. Everyone has a different way of resolving conflict, right? And so that's more just a life skill of being good at solving problems together. So everyone finds their own path towards that. But it helps if you have your own responsibilities, right? As a company who believes about like the power of transparency and accountability in certain areas, right? Like the winner of the argument is the person who is in charge of the product if it's a product argument, right? And the winner of the argument, if it's a sales argument, is the person who's supposed to be in charge of sales, right? And so I think that's how we've delineated a lot of decisions where we disagree, is at the end of the day, if it's my job to grow the sales of the company and Josh disagrees about how to do it, we have to disagree and then commit to the path that I choose. And on the flip side, for him, I have a lot of opinions about the product, but that is his expertise and his domain. And even if I disagree, I need to be willing to commit to whatever he chooses in the rare moments that we don't see it the same way.
That makes sense. Just going with the expertise to break it down in simple terms. Yep. I usually like to end out with tips for young professional, but I would like to ask you if you have to provide a couple of tips for aspiring entrepreneurs, what would that be?
Hmm. Aspiring entrepreneurs, what would that be? I already used my like baby steps to your business, so I can't throw that back out again. I think every business is a passion project. And don't start a business to make money because the odds are against you. And I think like when it gets hard, also just like your own internal emotions will be against you as well. But if you're building a business because you're passionate about the outcome, you're passionate about solving the problem, and at the end of the day, you say, you know what, I'm going to put everything into solving this problem. And if it turns out a different company solves it better, I'll be excited that someone figured it out, right? Approaching it with that mentality makes the whole experience so much more enjoyable, right? And yeah, life's too short to be focused on getting rich. It's a lot more rewarding if you're focused on, yeah, solving the problems that are out there. And so I think that'd be my number one, because businesses don't succeed in a year. And like if you're a young professional, spent about 4 years doing this now. Like as a young professional, that's a long time, right? 4 years at one company, and I'll probably be doing this a lot longer than that when everything's said and done. So you just got to be ready to commit to that journey. Yeah, that's probably my number one. Yeah. Can I ask you a couple questions? I know I talked a lot, but I feel like putting you in the hot seat on the flip side, I would appreciate. Like,
Oh, yeah, sure.
I don't, now that you're like walking the walk, right? Because, you told me you're across a couple different projects and you're like trying to solve, I'm sure, a whole host of problems. Like, what do you feel like construction really needs? Like you're also talking to a bunch of different solution providers. Like when you're sitting there, you're just like, yeah, where do you see it going? Where do you see the next stage?
I think definitely technology is something which has taken over, and a lot of I would say even the subcontractors are getting into using these solutions, mostly because of GCs being mandate in their contracts about using this technology, right? So they are also kind of getting used to it. But I feel that there are certain tasks which are still done on Excel, which is fine. It works fine in most of the cases. Sometimes I feel like that's the thing which kind of gets the work done. So that's one aspect where I think it is good to have those tools to kind of tackle that kind of problems. But again, on a management level, you should definitely have tasks which helps you to reduce your time, uh, but again, not involving 10 different softwares to do 10 different things. That kind of doesn't serve the purpose of you saving time if you have to juggle between 10 applications to come up with 10 solutions. So I think with integrations, right, enterprise platforms are a better solution or is better appealing even to the general contractors or the owners because you can manage a whole lot in one place.
I love hearing about, especially people in your role, like your day to day and what it involves and what is in your head, because I spend too much time talking to the project executives and the C-suite people of the world that I think sometimes it's easy to optimize or lose touch with the people who are going to use the software on at baseline. And I think that's one of the fastest ways to kill your company. So yeah, I we'll talk more, I'm sure, and I would love to do this again.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Elijah, for being here. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for tuning in to Constructing Tomorrow. I hope this episode provided valuable insights and tips. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and drop a review or a comment. Until next time, keep building and stay curious.